Hello and welcome to the Hellraiser blog. Today's Hellraiser blog, we're going to look at James Degale versus Caleb Truax for the IBF Super-Middleweight title. It's a rematch. They boxed once already, where Caleb Truax came to London as a massive underdog and actually upset the apple cart and beat James Degale in London on home soil. And this is the rematch. When I heard of the fight, I've got to tell you, I wasn't interested at all. I thought it's a keep busy fight for James, so that he's coming off a win, gets him a little bit busier, and sets him up for a big fight, maybe with George Groves, or with, at the time, Chris Eubank Jr. hadn't lost yet, so maybe against Chris Eubank Jr. or Callum Smith. Or there's a number of options there for a bigger fight for him, a sexier fight, a more funky fight. It's just one of those fights that couldn't get my motivation going for it. You know, I just sort of paid I gave it lip service really. I thought, oh yeah, you know, James Degale coming back to London, everyone gets excited and goes down to watch him, but it's not really a fight that I would get that excited about. I've got to say, about 15 seconds into the fight, 10 seconds into the fight, I just, wow, ooh, the tactics that Caleb Truax came in with were perfect for fighting James Degale. You could see, I think someone must have sort of chapter and verse given Caleb Truax the tactics, or maybe Caleb dreamt them up himself, I don't know, but if someone did help him, he owes them a big thank you, because his tactics were absolutely perfect. Straight away he stuck to James. He pushed James back, he forced James to fight at his range, to fight at his pace. He sort of, it just like, if you could write a book on how to fight James Degale, Caleb Truax read that book. He came in, see if you give James space, and I've known James since before even his first amateur fight, since he was a kid at Dale Youth, and his first amateur fight was against a guy that I was training from St Albans, from Finchley in fact. Truax comes in. He uses great head movement. I remember the commentator saying, oh, he's walking forwards in straight lines. He was not. It looked like he was walking forwards in straight lines. He was coming close very quickly, but because of the upper body movement and the head movement he was employing, he was actually coming around once he was inside, he's coming around the sides, and he was sort of catching James with body shots, and as James's elbows were coming out to block, he's then coming up through the middle, and throwing a straight right and catching James. He also, in Caleb Truax, one thing that I would certainly never have said about him is he's got a great jab. He was out jabbing James Degale in that fight. Olympic Games gold medalist getting out jabbed by a guy that came from the tough man circuit. Unbelievable. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was astounding. James, I know, he's had surgery before that fight on his right hand, and he looked very uncomfortable. He switched several times in the fight from left-handed to right-handed. He didn't really throw his right hand with any sort of conviction. And you can't really blame the corner, because I remember Jim McDonnell listening to what he was saying in the corner, and he was imploring James, use some lateral movement, move sideways. And the tactics that Caleb Truax was employing actually were stopping James from being able to do that. But you'd expect an Olympic Games gold medalist probably to be able to get out and use to create space. Because James, when he's got space, as you saw, if you see that fight, the last 2 rounds, Degale actually does manage to start finding space. And for me, he wins the last 2 rounds. He dominates them. But before that, when Truax maybe was a bit less tired, James just couldn't get away from him. He was walking back into the ropes, sitting on the ropes and getting worked over. And there were also some signs, I think, that made me think, like, obviously I manage boxers, I promote a lot of guys, and one of the things that I always look for is fighters on the decline, especially guys that are up there that maybe aren't as good now as they were, like, 2 fights ago or whatever. And one of the things I look for is feet, because if a guy's shot, especially bigger guys like light middleweight upwards, their feet is one of the first places you can look for to see the signs of someone in deterioration. And James Degale, who has had phenomenal movement and footwork and balance throughout his career, in this fight was absolutely shocking. It was terrible. He just seemed completely listless, like he just had no solution to what was going on. And I'm really hoping for James himself, because I like him, and for British boxing, that this was not because of deterioration, him being shot, and that it was just he had a bad night. He could have had a problem with motivation. You know, a guy that's won an Olympic Games gold medal, that is a world champion, who's eyeing, as he spoke about before the show, eyeing fights with George Groves, Callum Smith, Chris Eubank Jr., who was still sort of on a winning run at that time. It's possible that, okay, Caleb Truax coming over from abroad, no problem, you know, I'll win this one comfortably. So his motivation, he might not have pushed himself. I'm hoping that that's what it is, because then now he's lost against him, he will be motivated and can turn it around. But the way that he moved his feet, it really marked me, and the way that he didn't seem to have any solution to Truax's work inside. Normally James very good at getting to distance and keeping guys away with his jab. His right hand, who I know he's had surgery on it, James seemed like he maybe had no conviction, no sort of no devil in his right hand. That's a massive disadvantage for. I mean, James Degale with no jab is not James Degale. It's a different fighter. For me, the tactics he needed to hold the centre of the ring longer. I'm not saying stand in the centre of the ring permanently, because that would be bad as well, but to hold it for as long as he can and work behind his jab and move sideways so that he could keep that long range. But that wasn't happening. What was happening was Truax was walking him to the ropes, holding him there, coming around the outside to the body, and then as James was moving his elbows out, boom, straight away, he was coming up through the middle and catching him with straight shots. And Truax, you've got to take your hat off to him, because like I say, the tactics he engaged were perfect. He showed brilliant punch variety. I mean, if you watch it, the punch variety was like micromanaged to be perfect to pull James Degale apart. Now, we're looking at the rematch. Okay, so you've got to think, that was in the UK. Now, if I was promoting that show, I don't know whether they did this or not, but if I was promoting that show, I'm thinking, right, my guy's a mover. James Degale is a mover. He's always been a mover. We know the tactics that he's suited. He's fighting a guy who isn't really a great mover, who's a sort of a plodder. I'd have had a really thin as is allowed by the rules, ring mat, because that allows my guy to move and means that he can win. The rematch is at the Hard Rock Casino in Las Vegas, a place that actually I really like it for the box. I've been to some really good shows there, different promoters that have gone there, but it's a brilliant. The relevance, the ring mat is like that. It's like a mattress. Because in Vegas casinos, they're not interested in two guys running away from each other for 12 rounds. They want two guys to sit in front of each other and go to work. And I think if they have that usual ring mat, James Degale's movement is going to be even harder than it was in the first fight. He's going to have to stand and trade. Because if he tries to move around like that, after 3 rounds, his legs will be in pieces. He won't be able to keep moving for the full 12 rounds. And he looked like he was tiring. I'd say I'd give James Degale the last 2 rounds. He did get a second win and come back into it, and I'd say he dominated those last 2 rounds and he won them. But earlier in the fight, before Caleb Truax, his feet slowed down, he was dominating it. I mean, for a guy like Caleb Truax, who, like I say, has no jab for me, to be out jabbing James Degale for long periods of the fight spells trouble. And if you were to have a bird's eye view of the ring, you'll see Caleb Truax definitely dominates the ring space. And for this reason, right, I think he's a really good value bet. I mean, he was 9-2. I think he's now about 7-2, which is like 3.5 to 1. You bet £100, you get £450 back. What a good value bet, especially as James is showing. It's 50-50. If he was not motivated, he might come back a different fighter. If that's the problem, no problem. But if it wasn't that he wasn't motivated, it's just that he has had his day, spells trouble. Thanks for watching, guys. Give us a like and subscribe. I'm going to go for Truax on points. See you then, guys. Bye-bye.